Erin, welcome to the Corporate Athletes Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our discussion.
So am I. So, what's the one thing about how people learn that you were wrong about early on?
I think the stereotype is that people can learn things very quickly and apply them really quickly, and that's just really not true. There's a lot to say about adult learning principles that is something that a lot of people really don't know about. That you have to learn things at the right moment in order to be able to apply them in a way that's meaningful for you personally versus sitting in a class with 200 people and absorbing and then be expected to regurgitate things on a test or we really don't retain things in that way. Our brains don't work that way. We have to apply things in the moment in a way that's real and authentic and meaningful for us. And that's when we really remember things. And so I think it's fair to say that anytime we think back to our favorite teacher or our favorite coach or even a mentor or a family member that really invested in us and taught us something, it's because it felt personal and they knew us pretty well enough to know what was meaningful for us at that moment. And then you apply it in a way that is going to really change your life or at least incrementally make a difference for you. So that's really the core of the work that I do every day to help systems, businesses, organizations to rethink and reprogram how they design learning experiences, because as we know, typically they're very punitive. They're not fun. People do it to check a box, whatever that box is, whether it's a degree or a master's program or professional development or a certificate or a badge or whatever it is. And the learning isn't there. And so we're thinking about like, how can we make it meaningful for the learner as much as it's meaningful for the organization that's looking to teach somebody something?
Did you have a particular mentor that turned you on to the power of lifelong learning?
I do. I remember it's one of those stories. It's my fifth grade teacher. I always think about her, Mrs. Parker. And I grew up as a dancer, and she came to my dance recital, and no teacher had ever even considered coming to my dance recital. And so she sort of crossed the fence, so to speak, into my personal life as a fifth grader. And then in my class with her, she was able to point to my discipline that she saw in me as a young dancer. She mirrored some things with the content we were studying to choreography and what that looks like. And so, true to what I just said, she really was able to make it personal for me and meaningful for me. And I'll never forget that.
How do you navigate the balance between those that work at home predominantly, versus going into the office where there's much more face to face? How does that affect the learning landscape?
Yeah. Um, like I'll take that in like a corporate environment where we're designing trainings, for example, and thinking about how to upskill somebody that's new to a team or even like a mentorship program for somebody that's been there a long time and they need more support from their boss or from their manager. We pull apart the typical approach that's usually like, watch this webinar that's asynchronous and maybe take a little 5-question quiz at the end of the webinar and then, okay, cool, that stuff. It's like, no, they don't know that stuff, especially, again, if they're not applying it the next day or in the next 5 minutes, right? And so we're always thinking about, especially with remote offices, how can we design what we call a learning ecosystem? And so it might include that webinar, but then it's a follow-up the next day or the next week with your mentor. And then it's, okay, here's a quick questionnaire that you can look at in your phone on your way to work that will regurgitate that information and help you apply it. And then it's maybe a real world scenario in your job where you're like, okay, I'm going to use this information that I know and that I've kind of course corrected or really unpacked with my manager to talk about how it applies for me. And then I'm going to show that I know it in the job or in that next meeting or that next workshop, whatever that might be. And so we're always pulling apart like the typical approach to like just push it through and then saying,
Yeah.
okay, what could make this not only more fun, but also, of course, more equitable, accessible? That's a big part of the work we do as well. And then, multiple channels, multiple moments to really think about what it is that they're learning and how can they be successful in that.
I always say, you can't learn how to play tennis by reading a book. You you
Exactly.
you
Hmm.
got to get on the court and engage with the skills. And you also need somebody there. It's interesting. I asked one of my players recently for his advice on how we can continue to strengthen our culture. And he said, you know, weekly meetups with one-on-one, just getting together for coffee or for lunch and then reporting back to the team, in a group setting, just, what transpired. And I was like, that's so simple. They're so much smarter than I am. This is good. This is good.
That, I think that's true. That people need coaches in all parts of their lives, right? And of course, the sports container of what a good coach does. Also, good corporate coaches, good mentors, like that idea of people like to talk about things. They need that time one on one or in a small group setting to talk about how they're feeling about something, where they need to work, what, holding up the mirror to say, like, this is what I see in you, but this is what I also think you could improve. Like the coach mentality throughout an entire lifetime and not just in the typical containers that we think about these things in. So, love that.
That. What does the learning experience system do that a traditional training program can't?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more of what we were just saying around, thinking about from the learner perspective, what do they want and need to be successful? And so oftentimes with certainly big corporations that are thinking about training and even, curriculum designers that are thinking about what does that next education product look like? A lot of conversation right now around AI infusions around what those product services look like, of course. They're not typically all that learner centered. And so that's what we do, that we always hold up the mirror as human centered designers and innovators to say, sure, this company needs, the value prop identified. We need better top line revenue. We need better products to outcompete the competitors. Of course. But let's think about what the learner really wants and needs in order to get to those revenue goals and those milestones that you all as a system are looking to uphold and maintain, and what that looks like for success as a executive team, for example. And so um, we are doing a lot of user research with learners, with administrators, with students of all kinds, adult learners, to hold up the mirror and say the representing the learner in that learning experience. And so that's where a lot of the insights come from. And what's cool about what we do is that we work with so many different clients that we can kind of cross pollinate the learnings and share not only what we're hearing from this particular stakeholder group and this learner group, but also here's what we know about how people learn. Here's what we know about how people are feeling about some of these trends around AI uptake, around the future of higher education right now, just a lot of that stuff that we're thinking about and touching every day that we can, bring to all of our clients across the board.
So you've mentioned the metaphor holding up the mirror a few times in our conversation. Can you touch upon um, the danger of blind spots in organizations, and just some of the things or some of the ways that you've gone to help companies identify those blind spots?
Yeah. I think, the idea of losing touch with the learner certainly is a huge blind spot. Uh, Other blind spots are small incremental opportunities to make learning more fun, enjoyable. I don't mind saying fun, even in corporate environments, say like, how can I make this fun for people? Like, let's
Yeah.
talk about that because, corporate jobs, corporate revenue goals, corporate milestones around where we want people to go from where they are now to, XYZ, where we want them to be. It's very systematized. It's very much about that JD, that job description. How do we promote people? And to me, it's more about yes, but we want to know where they want to go and how to make it enjoyable as they're working their way up through whatever those goals are for themselves and also for that organization. So those are certainly blind spots. So incrementally, like how can we make these things more digestible, more enjoyable, more equitable, as we said. Um, I think other blind spots right now are certainly the bridge that so many people are thinking about between graduation from whatever program that is around higher education, more typical degree programs, graduation from boot camps, certification kinds of programs. How can those credentials, whatever those are, transfer into workforce readiness, whatever that looks like? And so that's been a lot of really interesting, great, challenging, but very opportunistic kind of work to think about how colleges, universities, education programs at large are able to ensure that they're properly training up people to be ready for the jobs of the future.
I love your emphasis on creating a fun environment. Just, from a personal standpoint, a few years ago when I added the word playfulness to my list of personal core values, it sort of opened up the world to me. And I'd be curious to see how many companies out there have fun in their mission statement, so to speak.
Yeah. There's a great book by Catherine Price, just about, I think it's called The Power of Fun, something to that effect. And she talks about this as an entire book, just like the idea of play, the idea of resonance in play, bonding that happens. I'm currently taking a Second City improv class in Chicago right now. And so it's so much of that, you're bonding with a group, you're having a good time, you're riffing together, you're building on ideas. And that's so playful. And we typically in normal life don't have an opportunity to do that.
It's playful and it's spontaneous. And I think it adds to your ability of what I call speed to lead, because things are changing so quickly. And I think taking an improv class, gets you to, you need to be quick in firing off responses and really
Yeah.
thinking on your feet. So I love that you're doing that. Um, Erin, when a leadership team says they want a learning culture, what are they usually asking for?
They're usually asking for people that are more open to feedback, that can pivot quickly, that can move with the pace of the business organization, um, that are capable of mentoring younger people or more junior people as they come in and need more experience, or maybe job pivoters that are coming in for the first time and need to get up to speed pretty quickly. It means all of those things from a pretty typical systemic point of view.
How does behavioral change come into play? Because, that bulleted list, um, it's pretty heavy, just in terms of individuals' ability to lead, not only themselves, but others, and to communicate and to take people along with them. What have you seen just in terms of the need for positive behavioral change in organizations?
Yeah. I think the organizations that do it best, there's a big trend right now. It's very top of mind because some of my team was just at the badge conference in Boulder, Colorado last week, and it's all about micro credentials and badging. And there's some organizations that do this work really well. Around IBM comes to mind, Salesforce comes to mind, where they're able to create behavioral change through this pretty stellar design around credentials within the organization, and it's a system that works for them. The fallout, of course, and the interesting part right now is that there's no general universal truth around what micro credentials can look like from business to business or from school to school, portability, etc. But nonetheless, the behavior change can happen if people kind of know that they are within this system, whatever that system looks like, and they have the ability to grow and try to reach to that next level of success, whatever that success looks like. As long as they want to play, of course, like play the game that you're putting in front of them. But I think that's where it's so interesting around the sports and fitness analogies come in with a lot of this learning design work where people want to know where they need to get to, what the expectations are, and then they can decide to change that behavior, grow into that capability, expertise, etc., whatever that looks like, if they want to play that game, if they want to grow into that next place.
Love that. You train for HYROX. Am I saying it right?
Yes. Mhm.
HYROX and marathons. What's the connection between physical endurance and how you think about learning?
Oh gosh, I could talk about that all day. Yeah, there's so like on a daily tactical perspective, just with training and being spending, hours on your, physical and mental health as much as the work itself. There's so much to say about having a spirit of learning as you're doing this with your body, and how your mind gets affected when you're doing this with your body every day and trying to get better and better, better every day, incrementally better every day, sure, but putting the work in to get there. I think it's very similar in a lot of ways, just as you're getting more and more physically fit and capable to do your sport or whatever you're choosing to do, you're learning. And if you don't have that spirit of learning and you're not building that team around you that you can trust to push you and to teach you those things that you need to learn, then you're not going to grow as fast or as well as you would if you trusted people and brought together that inner circle. So for me personally, just on a personal front, when I decided to go pretty all in on all of this now, like 8 years ago. I started as like trying to just get fit after being a designer for so long. And now it's become, endurance stuff. Building that team of nutritionists to help me, of course, the founders, the coaches at the gym, somebody who could teach me more about running in zone two and getting better and better and almost meditative in that regard. So for me, those are just some quick examples. But of course, depending on your sport and what you're interested in, there's all kinds of people that can support that growth. And so being open to that and wanting that, I think, is going to really determine the success metrics and where people can grow. And so back to the coach idea, I always tell people, like, of course, professional athletes, people in colleges, universities have coaches that they trust and that push them. If we're going to be healthy, happy, and certainly on an endurance athlete track for our entire adulthood, we should maintain that spirit of growth and vitality by building that team just like you had when you were younger, perhaps building that team as you age in order to continue to meet those markers and do what you really want to do, whatever that is.
What's the greatest lesson you learned about yourself in your last race?
Oh, that's a good question. My last race was pretty exciting for me. So my last race was in New York City. It was a beautiful HYROX race. So for folks that don't know, HYROX is a race where you do 8 1Ks. It's an 8K broken up into 1Ks. You start with a run, and then there's 8 different stations, which include things like the upright skier, rower, wall balls, lunges with weights, the whole deal. So it's kind of functional fitness meets running. And so I had been in my first few HYROX races, I just finished my 7th race. I had been focused so much on the stations to just functionally be able to do them, 100 wall balls with 14, 16 pounds at the end of all of the rest of it, because that's the last station. That's really a lot. So just surviving that last station was sort of my first metric. And then just thinking about, well, how can my form on like sled pushes and pulls get better so that I can be faster? And this last race, I had been working on my running because I started training for the Chicago Marathon. And until a friend told me, I didn't know anything about zone two running, candidly. I really didn't. No one had told me, like, wow, that's great that you got that 9-minute mile, but your heart rate is like through the roof and you're going to, like, it's not good. And so I started running slower in zone two, and I've been building up my endurance. And of course, most people listening to the podcast probably know once you do that, you're able to run faster in races. So my last race, I cut so much time off of my time. I think it was like 15, 20 minutes off of my previous time because my running was stronger and faster, and I was able to just push that hard on the runs and still be able to do the stations as well as I did the last few races. And so I learned a lot about running, and I continue to. And I learned that when I put all of it together, I'm so much stronger. I wasn't sure if I pushed the runs really hard, if I would suffer on the stations, but it made me feel really good that, as we put all these things together and, work on specific things between races, it really does start to pay off.
How has training and competing all the time made you a better CEO?
So many different things on that. Of course, like getting up and putting the time in to work on myself, work on ourselves, pays off by 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you don't have that I'm exhausted and I just want to go have a drink kind of mentality, which it fairly says, a lot of people feel that way. And so I always encourage, like, just go to the gym twice a week, 3 times a week, and see how you feel in those slumps. And like maybe you don't want to go out and have happy hour. Maybe you'd rather go for a walk, or, just like the elevation of self and the celebration of self versus like, I just want to get through the day and then like try to just pretend like the day didn't happen. I think there's a big difference there just at the beginning. And then I think it just helps me make better decisions. It helps me um, hold up under pressure when having a challenging conversation with a client, being able to push back and say, here's the point of view. Um, it's being able to encourage my team. Most of my team is women, which I love. And, my hope is that, encouraging them to have their own time to invest in themselves, whatever that is. I'm pretty intense versus some of the other people on the team. Some people like to go to yoga, which is great. Some people like to, go for a long walk and get a cup of coffee, which is also great. So just anything to take care of ourselves so we can arrive as our best selves in that role. But I would say, from what I've seen with entrepreneurs in general, people that are running businesses, that have teams, that are growing their top line, oftentimes they do engage in sport of some kind or fitness of some kind because they need that outlet, because it gets really intense sometimes and you need to not only get that extra energy out but also like leverage that spirit in the work all day. And it travels all the way through. It's like that energy in our muscles, in our veins. It's like that helps us to be able to prime for whatever life throws at us that day.
Erin, when you hear the metaphor corporate athletes, what do you think of?
Yeah, I love the name because it gets to that idea of people that invest in themselves in order to invest in their clients and their teams. That idea that they are protective of their time enough to know that they need that in order to grow their business, grow the success of the people that trust them every day to be able to be successful on their own and meet those metrics for themselves too. And so, yeah, functionally, I love it because it's about, being in a corporate job, whatever that is, and also bringing that spirit of athleticism to the world, to the role.
I think you've just expanded our definition of corporate athletes here with our company. So thank you for that. I mean, people investing in themselves so they can invest in others and in their team is a great operating definition. Um, Erin, what advice do you have for next generation leaders on the come up?
Yeah. Uh, for those that are interested in entrepreneurship, I like to tell people that you always feel like you're on the high dive, so to speak. You never get used to it, but you get more comfortable with the fall and maybe you'll get creative with it. and uh, find people that you can have on your team. I'm part of this organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, EO for short. It's a global organization of all entrepreneurs. And I found it to be so helpful to have people that are experiencing the same challenges and opportunities. You can have that like safe space to talk with people that understand, because entrepreneurship can sometimes be pretty lonely because many people don't have a lot of friends that are also entrepreneurs, and it's just a different lifestyle. There's so many different things to consider. So that's what I would say to future owners, operators, people that even want to, you know, try it, see if they like it. If you have an idea that you feel like needs to be actualized into the world as a young person or an old person, no matter what, don't let age hold you back. Like if you have an idea that you want to bring into the world, I say do it. If you have a support structure, if you have the financial means to make it happen, do it, because you don't want to regret not doing it 10 years from now and wonder how it would have gone. For those that are interested in working towards a certain role or a certain kind of professionalism, I would say try on as much as you can as a young person before you really decide. In the world of innovation, the way we think about process and the work is to prototype, just try some stuff and then test it. And actually, in my book, Learning in the Wild, I talk about this as a professional endeavor, but also a personal endeavor. Like it even applies for if you're interested in getting a pet, a dog, like ask people that have that kind of dog and maybe ask to pet sit or, hang out with that dog for a while. It's a silly example, but it's that idea of prototyping before you really commit. Um, because I think the saddest thing in the world is when we have people graduating from an undergrad experience in a certain pathway and they realize, I really don't want to do this. This is not something I want to do. And we have seen that so many times. And so I would say if you are in that position, pivot, prototype, try on the things as soon as you possibly can that you would want to do. So, if you want to study law instead of marketing, like go talk to some lawyers, go ask to sit with them, create an apprenticeship experience for yourself. If you want to be a vet, go ask for friends that could introduce you to people that you could informational interview. Just anything you can do to get further faster into what you really are excited about and passionate about, and then grow from there. Once you figure it out, go all in. That's something I learned as a business owner too, where we started more generally around social impact. Because in my previous consulting jobs, I was just interested in anything to do with impact. I also started a nonprofit back in 2009, which is a whole nother story, but I really wanted to understand from like a consultative perspective what I wanted to do. So we started a social impact, and then 5 years in, we've been in business for 12 years. We pivoted into just education and learning because that was the work that I and the team were just so passionate about. So we went all in. But it took those prototyping years to really understand and sort of level set and try all of it on in order to go all in. But when you know, and just like invest and commit is what I would say.
It's great advice, you know, learning from the small failures along the way to build resilience. And from that, you gain confidence and clarity, and you end up finding your sweet spot. Erin, what do you want your legacy to be?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that on a podcast. I love that question. I want to be known for innovating the world of learning, helping people to identify and get onto the pathways that they really want to be on. I want to be known as a good boss, somebody who really cared about my team. Um, I also like the fact that I don't take the work too seriously. I really enjoy coming into a corporate environment and being a bit disruptive from sort of a tenor perspective, as much as I know that I love and hope to be known for being disruptive in a really good way. Like, why are we doing this? Let's rethink how we can do this better and what needs to change in order to get there. I know that I am not a implementer in a traditional sense. I would never be a good operator, a COO or something like that. I love to bring vision to teams and help people hold hands around new ideas. And so my hope would be that I'd be known for that. And then, of course, you know, taking care of myself, the longevity piece. I like knowing that several, women friends, even a fellow entrepreneur last night was like, just seeing what you're doing on social media, it's really inspiring. I'm like, thank you for telling me that. So for the listeners, I would say, like, if you're inspired by somebody, tell them, like, right now, like, write them a letter, call them, text them, because I don't think we tell each other that stuff enough. And the world is a better place when we all encourage each other in that way. And a good mom, just like supporting. I have one kiddo, he's 16, and we have a great relationship. I love just watching him grow into the person that he is and what he's interested in doing. Um, so yeah, great question.
And I want to thank you for your time today. I also want to thank you for just sharing, part of your story and your insight, your competitiveness, your vision, but I think most importantly, your passion for lifelong learning, which I believe is the key to being happy in life. We've got to keep growing and evolving. So thank you for your example.
Thank you for your example, and thanks for inviting me to the conversation. This has been really fun.
Always. I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely.